The Psychology of Perception, when nothing ever goes wrong.
Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Welcome to the Psychology of Us. I'm Professor RJ Starr, and today we're exploring a deceptively simple statement, one that challenges the very way we experience reality. In my world, nothing ever goes wrong. These words come from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, a 20th century Indian spiritual teacher. Unlike many philosophers or religious figures, he didn't come from privilege or academia. He was a small shopkeeper in Mumbai, selling tobacco products for most of his life. His journey towards spiritual awakening wasn't shaped by formal education or theological study. Rather, it was sparked by a chance encounter with a teacher who introduced him to self-inquiry, the practice of turning inward to understand the nature of reality. Maharaj's response to suffering was radical. When confronted with questions about war, starvation, and suffering in the world, he said, "In my world, nothing ever goes wrong." To most people, that sounds either naive or detached. But was it? Or was he pointing to something deeper, something psychological, something fundamental about how we process the world? Today, we're looking at Maharaj's perspective through the lens of cognitive psychology, examining how perception shapes reality and how we, through shifts in our cognitive processing, can change the way we experience the world. Let's take a look at perception by starting with a simple thought experiment. Imagine two people standing in the same storm, rain pouring down on them in thick, relentless sheets. The air is cool, the sky a dark swirl of shifting clouds, and the wind carries the scent of wet earth. One person tilts their face upward, closing their eyes, arms stretched slightly away from their body, as they soak in the sensation of the water trickling down their skin. They are laughing, maybe even exhilarated, taking in the sheer energy of the moment. The other stands hunched, shivering, muttering curses under their breath as they try to shield themselves from the downpour. They are miserable, their thoughts fixated on how uncomfortable and inconvenient the situation is, wishing they could be anywhere else. Same storm, same rain, but two completely different experiences. Why? Because perception, not the event itself, determines emotional response. This is the foundation of cognitive appraisal theory, which suggests that emotions are not direct reactions to events, but rather they emerge from how we interpret those events. Richard Lazarus, a pioneer in the field, argued that our brains constantly evaluate the meaning of situations before generating emotional responses. We do this almost instantaneously, often without realizing it, constructing meaning in a way that shapes our reality.
Consider how this applies beyond a sudden rainstorm. If you view a major life change, say, an unexpected job loss, as a catastrophic failure, your emotions will reflect that interpretation. You may feel despair, anger, or helplessness. But if you see that same event as an opportunity, a push towards something new and potentially better, your emotional experience changes entirely. Instead of devastation, you might feel a sense of anticipation or even empowerment. The reality itself remains the same. What shifts is the lens through which you see it.
Fear arises when we view a situation as a threat. Excitement emerges when we see it as a challenge. Gratitude follows when we perceive an event as an opportunity. And if, like Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, you reach a state where you view all events as simply unfolding, neither good nor bad, just happening, then in your world, nothing ever truly goes wrong. The storm is just rain, A setback is just a moment. The meaning we attach to it is entirely up to us. Now let's talk about how the brain filters reality, because this idea isn't just philosophical, it's deeply rooted in biology. Your brain is an incredible pattern recognition machine, constantly filtering through an overwhelming amount of information. At any given moment, your senses take in far more than your conscious mind can handle. Every second, your nervous system is processing sights, sounds, smells, bodily sensations, an endless flood of raw data. If you were to consciously process every bit of information entering your senses, it would be unbearable. Instead, your brain prioritizes, focusing only on what it deems most relevant. Think about the last time you walked into a crowded room. The air was filled with voices, some engaged in casual conversations, others animated with excitement. There was movement everywhere, people shifting in their seats, adjusting their posture, checking their phones. Footsteps echoed off the floors, and the hum of background music might have been present, blending into the chatter. And yet, despite this chaotic symphony of stimuli, your brain didn't process everything. Instead, it selected what was most important, perhaps the sound of your name spoken across the room, or the familiar sight of a friend waving in the distance. This process is called selective attention, and it is essential for survival. It allows us to focus on what is meaningful while filtering out unnecessary distractions. Imagine a time when early humans had to hunt for food. The rustling of leaves in the wind could be ignored, but the subtle movement of an animal in the distance demanded immediate attention. Selective attention is the reason why, when you buy a new car, you suddenly start noticing that model everywhere. It's not that more of those cars appeared overnight, it's that your brain has been primed to recognize them. But here's where it becomes interesting. What we pay attention to becomes our reality. If you train your mind to focus on what's wrong, you'll see an endless stream of evidence supporting that perception. The world will appear unjust, filled with obstacles, disappointments, and negativity. You'll notice every moment of rudeness, every act of selfishness, every instance of unfairness. But if you train your mind to notice moments of kindness, opportunities for growth, and glimpses of beauty, your experience of reality shifts. You begin to see generosity in strangers, resilience in difficulty, and meaning even in the smallest experiences. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj's perspective suggests that he trained his mind to filter reality differently, stepping outside the habitual tendency to label events as good or bad. Rather than seeing events through a lens of resistance or personal injury, he saw them as simply unfolding. Instead of categorizing experiences as fortunate or unfortunate, he let them be. This is not passivity, it is mastery over perception. It is the ability to experience life without becoming entangled in constant judgment.
Psychological research supports this idea. Studies on cognitive reappraisal, a technique in cognitive behavioral therapy, demonstrate that how we choose to interpret events directly affects our emotional well-being. In one study, participants who reframed stressful events as challenges rather than threats experienced lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and reported greater emotional stability. Other research shows that individuals who regularly engage in gratitude practices, a deliberate effort to focus on the positive aspects of life, experience heightened levels of happiness and reduced symptoms of depression.
If we take Maharaj's perspective and apply it through the lens of cognitive psychology, we begin to see a profound truth. Suffering is often a matter of perception. The external world remains unchanged, but how we filter it determines whether we experience distress or peace. By shifting our focus, we don't deny reality, we reshape our experience of it. And in doing so, we take one step closer to living in a world where, truly, nothing ever goes wrong. So now, what about changing the story we tell ourselves? One of the most powerful tools in cognitive behavioral psychology is cognitive reframing, the practice of shifting the way we interpret situations. This isn't just an abstract concept, it's a skill with profound psychological effects, shaping the way we experience everything, from daily inconveniences to life-altering events. Take, for example, a well-documented study on Olympic athletes and their emotional responses to winning medals. At first glance, one might assume that the closer an athlete gets to gold, the happier they must be. But researchers discovered something unexpected. Bronze medalists, who placed third, often reported feeling happier than silver medalists, who placed second. Why? The key was in their frame of reference. Silver medalists tended to compare themselves to gold medalists, focusing on what they almost had but lost. Their thought process wasn't, "I won a silver medal," but rather, "I was so close to gold, and I didn't get it." Meanwhile, bronze medalists compared themselves to athletes who finished in fourth place and beyond, those who didn't make the podium at all. Instead of dwelling on what they missed, they framed their experience around what they gained. At least I made it onto the podium. The event, winning a medal, was the same. The experience of that event, however, was radically different depending on the lens through which it was viewed. This same concept applies far beyond sports. Consider two individuals who lose their jobs on the same day. One spirals into despair, focusing on what they've lost: financial security, routine, a sense of professional identity. The other, while still acknowledging the difficulty of the situation, sees it as a chance to step back and reevaluate, an opportunity to explore new career paths, start a business, or pursue a long-postponed passion. The loss itself doesn't change. What changes is the meaning attached to it, and that meaning dictates the emotional response. Now, let's return to Maharaj's perspective. He took cognitive reframing to its most extreme and absolute form. Instead of tweaking how he saw reality in certain situations, he fundamentally removed the expectation that reality should align with his personal desires. Rather than categorizing experiences as good or bad, fair or unfair, he stepped outside of that framework altogether. If you strip away the belief that things should be different than they are, then suffering, at least the kind that arises from resistance and disappointment, dissolves. If there is no mental should, then nothing ever truly goes wrong. It just is. This doesn't mean Maharaj was advocating for complacency or a lack of engagement with the world. Rather, he understood that expectation is what generates suffering, not the event itself, but the mind's insistence that reality should be something other than what it is. When we let go of that insistence, we gain the freedom to move through life with far less internal resistance and far more peace. From a psychological standpoint, this radical acceptance isn't about passivity, but about emotional mastery. It doesn't mean we stop striving for improvement or growth, but it does mean we stop attaching our emotional well-being to an imagined version of reality that may never come to pass. When we accept what is, without the mental baggage of what should be, we become more resilient, more adaptable, and ultimately, more at peace. What about the cost of resisting reality?
One of the core lessons in acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is that much of human suffering does not stem from reality itself, but from our resistance to that reality. This principle is fundamental in psychological resilience, emotional well-being, and even pain management. It suggests that our struggles are often not about what happens to us, but rather about the mental fight we engage in when we reject what is.
A well-known case study in pain psychology highlights this concept. Researchers examined two groups of chronic pain patients. One group that actively resisted their pain, constantly ruminating on thoughts like, "This is unfair. I can't live like this. I need this to stop." And another group that practiced acceptance-based coping strategies. The findings were striking. Patients in the first group, who mentally fought against their pain, reported higher levels of suffering, greater emotional distress, and a poorer quality of life than those in the second group, even though both groups experienced similar levels of physical pain. Those who accepted the presence of their pain, not as something desirable, but as a reality that did not need constant mental resistance, were significantly less distressed and more functional in their daily lives. This aligns seamlessly with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj's perspective on suffering. Maharaj did not argue that pain, hardship, or adversity did not exist. He simply refused to label them as inherently wrong or unacceptable. He understood that the moment we declare something as wrong, we create an internal war between what is happening and what we think should be happening. That Mental war, rather than the event itself, is where much of human suffering originates. To understand this, imagine being stuck in heavy traffic on your way to an important meeting. If you immediately think, "This is unacceptable. This is ruining everything. This shouldn't be happening to me," your distress level skyrockets. Your physical situation, sitting in a car, moving slowly, hasn't changed, but your resistance to the reality of traffic amplifies your suffering. Now, imagine responding differently. Instead of mentally battling the situation, you acknowledge it. This is the reality right now. I am in traffic. I can use this time to think, to listen to music, to breathe. The traffic is the same, but the experience is entirely different. This ability to step away from mental resistance is at the heart of ACT, which teaches that psychological flexibility, the ability to accept difficult emotions and experiences without trying to avoid or suppress them, is one of the most important factors in mental health. Maharaj's philosophy is, in essence, the ultimate form of psychological flexibility. By not categorizing experiences as good or bad, right or wrong, he eliminated the mental struggle altogether. Modern psychology backs this idea in several ways. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn, is built on the same principle. Suffering is greatly reduced when we learn to observe our experiences without resistance or judgment. Studies on radical acceptance, another therapeutic approach, show that people who practice accepting reality without conditions experience significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression than those who constantly fight against their circumstances. It's important to note that acceptance does not mean passivity. Maharaj's view was not about resignation or complacency. He was not advocating for inaction in the face of suffering, but rather for the removal of unnecessary psychological suffering that comes from arguing with reality. Just as a person with chronic pain can acknowledge their condition while still seeking treatment, we can accept life's difficulties while continuing to work toward improvement. Acceptance is not about giving up, it's about letting go of the internal battle that serves no purpose. From a practical standpoint, this shift in perspective can be life-changing. If we stop resisting what already is, we free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy that can be used for growth, problem-solving, and inner peace. The next time you encounter something difficult, a delay, a rejection, a challenge, pause and ask yourself, am I suffering because of the situation or because I am resisting it? That simple shift in awareness can be the first step toward a profound transformation. So, what about the illusion of control? There's another psychological concept at play here, learned helplessness. This was famously studied by psychologist Martin Seligman, whose research in the 1960s provided groundbreaking insights into how perceived lack of control can lead to psychological paralysis. Seligman and his colleagues conducted experiments on dogs to explore the effects of inescapable stress. In these experiments, dogs were placed in a controlled environment where they were exposed to mild but inescapable electric shocks. At first, they naturally tried to escape. But after multiple attempts with no success, the dogs stopped trying altogether, even when they were later given a clear way out. They had learned that their actions were futile, so they ceased all efforts to change their situation, even when circumstances changed, and escape became possible. This phenomenon became known as learned helplessness, and later research revealed that it isn't limited to dogs, it affects humans just as profoundly. When people experience repeated failures, setbacks, or uncontrollable negative events, they often internalize the belief that nothing they do will make a difference. This can happen in many areas of life. A student who repeatedly fails tests despite studying might stop trying altogether, assuming they are simply incapable of success. A person in an unhealthy relationship may feel trapped, believing there's no way to improve or leave. Someone who has faced rejection in their career may convince themselves that effort is pointless, and they begin to passively accept circumstances rather than challenge them. Learned helplessness is a deeply disempowering psychological state, one that can lead to depression, anxiety, and chronic stress. When people feel powerless for long enough, they stop looking for solutions, even when solutions exist. But there's another side to this: the illusion of control, the belief that we should be able to dictate how life unfolds. If learned helplessness is the extreme of passivity, the illusion of control is the extreme of over-engagement, where people believe they can and should control every aspect of their reality. This belief is just as destructive because when things inevitably don't go according to plan, it leads to frustration, anxiety, and suffering. Many people live caught between these two psychological extremes, feeling helpless when they can't change things, yet also clinging to the illusion that they should be able to control everything. The result? Constant tension, constant suffering. Maharaj's perspective sidesteps both of these traps. He neither resigns himself to helplessness nor attempts to control what cannot be controlled. Instead, he removes the expectation that things should be different than they are. This is where his approach fundamentally alters the experience of suffering. By refusing to label events as wrong or unacceptable, Maharaj avoids the psychological battle between reality and expectation. He does not waste energy resisting the uncontrollable, nor does he fall into despair, believing that he is powerless. He simply accepts what is, adapting to reality without resistance, and in doing so, he eliminates unnecessary psychological suffering. From a psychological standpoint, Maharaj's approach aligns with radical acceptance, a concept within dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, developed by psychologist Marsha Linehan. Radical acceptance teaches that suffering often comes not from the event itself, but from our refusal to accept it. When we let go of the mental struggle and simply acknowledge reality without judgment, we free ourselves from the additional pain caused by resistance. Consider a person facing an unexpected job loss. If they fall into learned helplessness, they may believe, "I'll never find another job. There's no point in trying." If they are caught in the illusion of control, they may think, "This shouldn't have happened. I need to fix this immediately, or my life is ruined." Maharaj's approach offers a third path. This has happened. Now what can I do next? No resistance, no unnecessary emotional turmoil, just acceptance and forward movement. This shift is transformative. It does not mean that Maharaj, or anyone practicing this mindset, becomes passive or indifferent. Instead, it means they stop engaging in pointless suffering over things that cannot be changed. They act where action is possible and accept where acceptance is needed. Imagine applying this principle in everyday life. When faced with a frustrating situation, like being stuck in traffic, receiving an unexpected bill, or experiencing a personal setback, rather than responding with resistance, "This is so unfair. This shouldn't be happening." Maharaj's approach would encourage us to drop the mental argument and accept the situation as it is. From a neurological perspective, this approach can significantly reduce stress and emotional distress. Research on mindfulness and acceptance-based therapies shows that when individuals accept reality instead of fighting it, they experience lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, increased emotional regulation, and even improved problem-solving abilities. By embracing what is, rather than mentally wrestling with what should be, we move through life with greater psychological flexibility, resilience, and peace. This is the essence of true emotional freedom, letting go of both helplessness and control, and simply existing in the reality of the present moment. Let me share a personal reflection. The day I lost my work. I once lost an entire manuscript I had spent months writing. It wasn't backed up. One technical glitch, and it was gone. The file was simply no longer there. I sat staring at my screen, clicking through folders in disbelief, as if sheer willpower might somehow summon the words back into existence. My heart pounded, my stomach tightened, and a slow wave of frustration and outrage surged through me. All those hours, all that effort, wasted. A deep sense of unfairness settled in my chest. How could this have happened? How could I have been so careless?
For a long moment, I allowed myself to feel the loss. I imagined all the painstaking revisions, the flow of ideas that had come together so beautifully, now erased. But then, something shifted.
I caught myself. I took a breath and sat back. What if I didn't see this as a loss? What if, instead, this was an opportunity? What if this was the chance to write something even better, something that would not have emerged if I had continued working on the previous version? At first, the thought felt unnatural, even forced. But I held on to it, examined it, turned it over in my mind. The more I considered it, the more I realized that I had a choice. I could spiral into anger and disappointment, clinging to the past, or I could move forward. I could see this as an unexpected invitation to approach the project with fresh eyes, to write not from the memory of what had been lost, but from the potential of what could now be created. The moment I made that shift, the suffering dissolved. Nothing external had changed. The file was still gone, but my world changed, because my perception of it changed. That day, I experienced firsthand the power of cognitive reframing. The event itself remained neutral. It was my interpretation of it that dictated whether it would be a source of suffering or an opportunity for growth. And in that moment, I chose growth. Let's talk about how to bring this all into your life. Integrating these insights into your daily life begins with developing awareness of your mental habits. Pay close attention throughout the day to how frequently you find yourself labeling events or situations as bad, wrong, or frustrating. Becoming conscious of this pattern is a significant first step toward transformation. As you become more aware, gently question your initial reactions. When faced with frustrations or setbacks, pause for a moment to consider if the situation is genuinely catastrophic or simply differs from your expectations. This reflection helps build emotional resilience and adaptability. You can also practice cognitive reframing by intentionally shifting your perspective on challenging situations. For example, if you find yourself stuck in traffic, instead of viewing it as a negative disruption, try perceiving it as an unexpected moment of calm, a rare pause in your busy day. This approach not only reduces stress, but also enriches your experience of everyday moments. Finally, embrace the principle of accepting reality as it unfolds, rather than resisting or wishing things were different. This radical acceptance isn't about passive resignation. Rather, it represents a mindful and deliberate choice to interact constructively with life, exactly as it presents itself. By practicing these mindful adjustments, you can cultivate a profound sense of peace and emotional balance. So, as we come to a close, let's remember that Maharaj's words are not an invitation to dismiss suffering or pretend hardships don't exist. Rather, they challenge us to see suffering for what it truly is, something that arises not from the event itself, but from the way we interpret and resist it. Reality unfolds as it does, indifferent to our expectations, but the meaning we attach to it is entirely within our control.
If we can shift that perspective, if we can loosen our grip on the idea that things must go a certain way for us to be at peace, then perhaps suffering loses its hold. Perhaps we begin to see life not as a series of obstacles to endure, but as an unfolding experience, one that is neither against us nor for us, but simply is. And in that shift, we may just find that, in our world, nothing ever truly goes wrong.
I'm Professor RJ Starr. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of your mind. It's shaping far more than just your thoughts. It's shaping the very world you live in.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.